So a massive welcome. Thank you for having me, Stephen. My name's Nicky. On the slide, you can see me, and this is my co-star, Brian, the therapy dog. Brian makes all the executive decisions in our business. I'm not responsible for anything. Brian would have liked to have been here, but flying from the UK, we've come down from Sussex, wasn't feasible. But I've spent 27 years working with children and teenagers. I started my career in the early years working in nurseries. The one thing I hope you will take from this is it's okay to get bored and change your career, because it's like my fourth career and it's okay. And I think we work with a lot of kids in coaching who think you have to have one career for your whole life. And I'm a bit like, no, you just keep evolving, and let's keep evolving. So I started off in the early years sector. I became a lecturer for 16 to 19-year-olds. Really unfortunately at 21, I was the victim of domestic violence. And I don't really like that word victim, because it was the best thing that ever happened in my life and literally changed the trajectory of it and made me stop being scared of people and made me start doing what I wanted to do. The really unfortunate part of that is, one, I am a bit of a perfectionist, so I laughed about what was said about perfectionists and eating, so I actually ended up with anorexia off the back of the domestic violence from the stress. And I went to see a therapist who cocked their head at me and went, "And how do you feel about that?" And that was kind of the moment when I went, there's got to be something better out there than this when we start supporting young people. What that started was a mission where I trained as a therapist, as a hypnotherapist and an NLP and coaching, and I kind of decided that the mental health industry was wrong. So I'm not going to talk to you about sports coaching this afternoon, despite the fact that I did spend a couple of years working in the NHS in child obesity teams, and I am a personal trainer and it's something that I loved. But I'm going to talk to you about how we need to start changing our coaching techniques to start adapting to the individual children in front of us. It's been a pleasure to be on a panel with so many people talking about meeting kids where they are, because the ethos of my whole company is about meeting children where they are. So 5 years ago, we set up Dandelion Training and Development, and we train mental health coaches for children and parents of children who have SEN needs. Because I feel like there's a massive gap that a lot of people receive a diagnosis or they have a challenge and they're receiving massive waiting times for help. They've got huge challenges with finding people who are actually well trained. And there are a lot of really bad qualifications out there that leave people ill-equipped to deal with the mental health challenges in front of them. The thing that we do believe in is about holistic care. So everything we do is about well-being. And it's about, I want you to be eating well, I want you to be moving well. But everything starts about where that child is who's sat in front of you and you not putting them in a tick box. So I really laughed at the comments about tick boxes this afternoon, because my company slogan is stop ticking boxes and start changing attitudes. So when we're not doing all of that, Brian's got his own book collection. It's called The Adventures of Brian. He's got 31 books all about children's feelings, and we spend a lot of time talking about how we talk about feelings. Can we stop putting labels on things and telling children they're sad or telling children they're anxious, and start helping them with their emotional literacy? Our emotional literacy skills in the UK are horrific, a bit like our physical literacy skills are really bad. One of the things I'm going to talk about this afternoon is about how actually our feelings expressions are equally bad, and we're trying to put children through the same systems. We also have a book called Don't Panic, the Official Dad's Guide to Parenting, because I got really tired of dads getting a bad rap. Most dads that I meet want to be phenomenal dads, but we kind of expect them to just know what to do. Women are generally very good at joining support groups and going off to NCT classes and things, whilst dads are often at work. And I really found that I was getting a lot of dads come to me saying, I want to be a better dad. How do I help my child who's autistic? How do I help my child who's anxious? So I was very fortunate to deliver some training to 80 dads last summer, and one of the things that came out of it was a book just for them. So what I'm going to talk to you about this afternoon is about attachment styles. And it is a passion project, so I apologise now because I could talk about them all day, but I've promised Stephen I'm going to keep to time and not make anything later. So I'm going to do a really fast over-review. What you have got in your packs from Stephen is a full set of notes from everything I'm talking about, so that you can go back to them, because I am aware we're going to do this quite quickly. I'm going to talk to you about how attachment styles affect the children that you coach, and how sometimes the way that we talk to children or present feedback to them can actually completely change whether they engage with you or don't. And I want us to just start being a little bit more conscious, whether it's with your teams, whether it's with the kids that you coach, even if it's with your partner at home, that their attachment style can really impact whether they're hearing you or whether they're completely shutting down or walking off and not engaging with you anymore. So, when you're coaching kids, do you ever see The child who listens, takes on board the feedback and acts on it, consistently making improvements. You've just got these kids that are just awesome, aren't they? They're like, they make us feel like really great coaches. Like, oh, I've really done a brilliant job. The child who looks indifferent or that they don't care about anything that you're saying. They might even tell you that they don't care what you're saying. The child who starts to apologise or make excuses for what happens. The child who stops engaging with you, coming to you or seeking you out for help ever after. It's almost like there's this invisible wall between you and them. The child who deflects or blames your coaching. I did once have an adult client who told me my hypnotherapy chair was the reason that she didn't get results. And the child who starts to cry, shut down, or does not attend the next few sessions after you give them feedback. And I'm like, if I ask for a show of hands, how many of you have had a couple of these in your coaching rooms? Yeah, some of you are brave. Because we don't just get one type of kid. We want the child who goes, yes, I take that feedback on board and I'm dealing with it. But if I asked all of you, if you receive feedback, which one do you maybe fall into? If we're really honest with ourselves, a lot of us find feedback very hard. So attachment theory was originally created by Bowlby, and he initially believed that the first 3 years of your life were fundamental in your ability to form relationships with other people. It was later adapted, and he said it was actually the first 5 years. But depending on how you are parented in that first 5 years determines your ability to manage stress and pain, your ability to build relationships, your ability to feel your feelings, and your ability to express feedback. And later in life, that's about our romantic relationships. And if you go and hang out on TikTok for long enough, you'll find out a lot about your relationship styles and attachments. But I don't think we talk about them enough about kids in coaching. So he said if you had a parent who was completely attuned to you, that when you cry, they're receptive and supportive. When you're struggling, they're there to help you and guide you. When you're having a bad day, they're there receiving you with love, that you will develop a better attachment style. But children who don't have that will struggle more. So what he found was if a child learns that if they cry and mum or dad come towards them and receive that, and they're curious and they're compassionate, that you will just be able to be soothed. However, if I cry and no one comes, I learn to do what we call upregulate. I learn to make a bigger fuss to make you come to me. I'll scream, I'll shout, I'll cry louder. Eventually I'll start kicking off left, right and centre. I'll do all the things that I need to do. If I get to a point and actually that's still not working, I just learn to just shut it all down. And these are really important things because sometimes as coaches, we can have kids in front of us not reacting the way that we want them to, and we take it on board that it's us. And yes, we have got a responsibility to think about how we're talking to children, how we're engaging with them. But I want you to be a little bit more curious and ask, I wonder what's going on with them. Because it can be really tough when you've got particularly groups of kids and they're not responsive and we're not getting the results out of them that we desperately want. And sometimes that's because there's something a little bit more going on. So I'm going to use a playground analogy because attachment theory is a bit dull. Like, I know I love it. I've literally just applied to do a PhD in it, but it can be a bit dull. I want you to imagine you're a child and you go to the playground. There's a massive slide and you look at your parent and you're like, oh my God, can I go on the slide? And your parent's like, yeah, go on the slide. So you climb up the ladder and you're waving to your mum or your dad and they're standing waving back. You get to the top of the ladder and they're like, have fun. You slide down the slide, they're there at the bottom, they give you a clap and you just want to do it again. And that's the child who has a secure attachment. Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing going on in my life, my parent is completely attuned to me. I've got their attention, I've got their encouragement, they want me to do well, but they also want to test me. It was really important what Sam was saying about getting out of our comfort zones, because actually comfort zones are huge and we spend far too much time in them. And we now live in a world where we can stay in them far too much. So we actually want to get that child to go and climb up the slide, even if it's a bit scary, and we want to be encouraging that. Oh, why have I got two slides? Oh, I've gone backwards. Have I gone the right? Oh, I'm so confused, Stephen. Okay. If I've got a secure attachment, I know that if I make a mistake, it's okay. My parent's going to support me. They're going to help me. I'm really encouraged to get out of my comfort zone. My parents are present with me and they're consistent with me. I know that whether I'm going to go to my parent and tell them I got great grades or whether I've made the biggest mistake of my life, I'm going to get a really positive response. I was just saying, when I set up my business, 13 years ago, I told my mum I was going to be a therapist and she told me it was the most stupid idea I've ever had in my entire life and I was going to regret it forever. And it's always there when I do this stuff because I'm literally the most stubborn person you'll ever meet. But She actually came to work with me 3 years ago, and I now pay her salary, which was a really, really rewarding moment when I went, can you remember what you said to me? And we actually have a much more secure attachment now. But, you know, these things shift. My feelings are nurtured and they're regulated, and I know that you're always going to support me. The child with an anxious attachment goes to the playground and they ask if they can go on the slide, and as they start climbing up, their parents say, oh my God, be careful, hold on, I don't want you to fall, please don't hurt yourself. And the child's like, oh my God, this looked like really good fun, but actually I'm halfway up the ladder and I don't know if it's fun anymore. They get to the top of the slide and they go to wave and the parents are like, hold on! And they're like, oh my God, okay, this is really scary and it's really dangerous and I'm gonna die. They come down the slide and the parents are like, do you wanna do this again? They're like, no, thank you. The child with an anxious attachment learns that the world is scary because their parents' own anxiety impacts them. Children don't learn to really be anxious. We're born with 2 fears, loud noises and falling. Everything else is learnt. And so much of that is learnt from us. Adults teach kids to be terrified. And those guys that obviously are in the sports industry, you know, we're just teaching them not to be scared anymore. Take chances, lose. You're not going to always win. Things are going to go wrong. We're going to teach you other ways. My child with an anxious attachment has really inconsistent parenting and inconsistent boundaries. My parents do too much for me, so I don't develop resilience. There's been lots of comments about resilience today, but resilience starts with us encouraging children to do things for themselves and not feeling like we have to jump in and do it for them. My parents can often be preoccupied, emotionally unavailable and critical. You know, that's not necessarily because they're bad parents. Most parents want to do really well, but we take our own childhood traumas into the next generation. My big feelings aren't regulated. I have big feelings and people don't know what to do with them, so actually I've just learned to cry and scream and yell to get the attention that I need to make myself feel safe. The child with the avoidant attachment goes to the playground, says to their parent, can I go on the slide? And their parent's too busy chatting on the phone, doing their own thing. So they just go, okay, I'll just go on the slide. And they just climb up the ladder. They get halfway up the slide and they look to their parent, but the parent's still distracted. So they're like, oh, I'll just carry on. And they get to the top and the parent's still distracted. They come down the slide, they finished, and they just get on with it. The child with the avoidant attachment has learnt the wonderful skill of hyper-independence. My issue with avoidant attachments is these are more prevalent than we make out, but we praise it all the time. They're so independent, they just get on with it. They don't need loads of prompting, or they just don't need us all the time. They're not the kid who puts their hand up in class. They're not the kid that comes to coaching and goes, excuse me, can I have some help? Because I've learnt that adults don't come. And that's not because adults don't want to come, it's because the adult's just not attuned to that child's needs. But the child who is hyper-independent has just learned that because of my own traumas, nobody's going to come and help me. So if I get on with this on my own, that's actually easier because I'm not going to be disappointed, I'm not going to be let down. The child who's got an avoidant attachment has learnt that actually it's a shameful thing if I show my feelings. They're the kids who can lose an event and you won't see them for a couple of weeks because those big feelings are so uncomfortable and I'm ashamed if I have them. If they do kick off at coaching, they do kick off at home, they will retreat to their bedrooms and they don't want the hug, they don't want to be soothed. These are the hardest people to give love to when something's gone wrong. They scream from it internally, but they're not ready to give it because I've learned that actually no one's going to give that to me. And my last one is my disorganised attachment. Disorganised attachments are associated with children who have been abused or neglected, so they are not the majority of our children. But they are the children that go to the playground, they're halfway up the slide, and they're being yelled at for not doing it properly. Why can't you just do this the way I showed you? They get to the top of the slide and they're being ridiculed because they didn't climb up quick enough. They come down the slide and they're being told off because I didn't do it fast enough, I didn't do it well enough, I didn't keep in my lane. Children with disorganised attachments have learned that the world is chaotic and it's not safe. They can't regulate their feelings, they explode all over everybody. They've been used to being shamed and criticised and bullied and picked on, and nobody's really ever cared for me very well. I do a lot of work as a therapist with children who are adopted and fostered, and you watch them squirm when you give them positive feedback. It's physically uncomfortable when you say something nice to me, because if I've grown up with this, I actually can't regulate it. I'm used to being told that I'm useless. I don't know how to manage this. So how does this fit into feedback? One, I've no doubt you're all thinking about yourselves or someone else you know and going, oh my God, that's them. That's why they behave that way. And there is a little bit of reflection that comes in attachments that go, we actually need to look at ourselves. And not because I need you to psychoanalyze yourselves or pick yourselves apart or ridicule yourselves, but just being aware. How do you cope with feedback? If you as a line manager receives feedback, how do you cope? What happens? So what they discovered when they started really digging into attachment styles is if I have a secure attachment style, I'm kind of in like the lottery. Yeah, I've got a really great foundation for everything. However, if I have developed an anxious attachment style, I overfill my feelings. You are more likely to be hospitalised with mental health issues, emotional needs, pain or stress if you have an anxious attachment style. So if you have a child in your coaching group who drops something on their foot and it's like the world fell apart, they're your child with the anxious attachment style. And their reactions are out of context of the world around them because they literally overfill them. And it's not because they're overreacting or being dramatic, it's literally their brain is more sensitive to those feelings and what's happening. If you have a child with an avoidant attachment or you're an adult with an avoidant attachment, you underfill your feelings. You're less likely to seek medical help, you're less likely to seek mental health support, you're less likely to go and support guidance if your wellbeing is struggling. So when we think about those of you that were talking today about things like injuries and kids that we go, how did they not know that that was going on? Sometimes this is literally because I've got an avoidant attachment style, I can't feel it. It's not something that my brain is picking up. Whereas if I have a disorganized attachment, I'm much more unpredictable, chaotic. A lot of people can just label these kids as difficult and just wash their hands of them. They don't want them around because this is making this really tough. So when we're thinking about how these kids might appear in your coaching programs, your children with secure attachments, which used to be the majority of children, they used to say this was the dominant group. We now know post-lockdown this has shifted massively. With the likes of things like Live 360, Snapchat maps, any child with an anxious attachment is 10 times worse. If you are a parent with an anxious attachment and you have Live 360 on your phones, you're literally fueling your anxiety all the time because we're literally saying to our brain, it's not safe, it's not safe, it's not safe. So we want these kids. These are like the wonderful children, and they come to coaching and they do everything that we want. They're trusting and they're confident and they're emotionally regulated, and you say, if you do this, you're going to get better. And they're like, yeah, okay, let me do it. Yeah, they're just so responsive. They are children that if they are given feedback, they take it well. They just want to do better, but they've got the grounding to do really well from it. They are willing to reflect and they'll ask questions and they'll practice and they'll keep coming back. So when we were talking about the rehab that you were doing with some of your young people, and it's like they took their rehab and went, yes, I'm going all in. I guess they're probably more here because it's like, I'm going to go in. Someone's telling me what to do. They're giving me this feedback and I know that this is going to help me. They are really open to coach-athlete relationships. They want you to train them. I really love, I am much more like, I love the concept of mentoring because actually these are kids that if they've got a mentor, they are the ones that will latch onto it. They do bounce back after mistakes. They might be a bit frustrated, they might be a bit annoyed, they'll talk it through and they get on. So as long as they've got really clear feedback and it's focused on actions and not their character, they will just flourish if they're in the right arena. If I have an anxious attachment, then I'm much more approval seeking. These are the kids that constantly ask questions that you know are kind of stupid questions. I'm not a lover of the concept of stupid questions, but these are the kids that can drive a coach nuts. Not because they're intending to drive you insane, but because they so need you to tell them that they are enough. They are desperately seeking your love, your adoration, your feedback, your guidance. They just want you to notice them. Because as a child with an anxious attachment, I am always attachment seeking. I'm constantly looking for you to give me some love. So when they're coming into coaching and you give them feedback, they only hear that feedback as you hate me. They don't hear, I want you to be better. They don't want to hear, if you do these 3 things, you're going to be even better at your sport or your physical activity or your movement. All they can hear is you hate me. I'm not good enough. And if you take nothing else away, because these are the majority of kids that we will now see, when you are giving feedback, think really carefully about how it's framed. Because once I've heard I'm not enough, you don't like me, you don't love me, I disengage from you. There's a real challenge with an anxious attachment that they will desperately seek you out, seek you out, seek you out, seek you out, and the moment they think they're not loved, they cut you off. And it's really destructive because it means that they're cut off very often from the very people who are going to help them the most. They're desperate for you to like them, want to help them, to support them, and the moment they hear something that is deemed as any slant on their character or not them being good enough, it's like, I'm done. So they desperately thrive off your connection, whether it's a little job that you give them to do, whether it's a little bit of positive feedback that you give. If you notice something that other people didn't notice, they will take a lot more from that than other people would. My child with the avoidant attachment comes into coaching and they're independent and they're emotionally guarded and they're hyper independent and they do all the things that they want to do. These are awesome kids. In the classroom, I spent 10 years teaching 16 to 19-year-olds, you praise these kids. They cause you no trouble. They get on, they're very often, they've already set the gym up for you, they've set the class up, they'll tidy up afterwards without being asked. Not because they have to, but because their brain is like, if I do this, there won't be any negative feedback. Yeah, it never comes from, I'm just being helpful. Hyper-independence with avoidant attachments, when you watch it in your gyms, these are the most helpful kids. These are the kids that you will go home and go, they never cause me any trouble, they cause me no stress, they're just, they just get on with it. And because we praise it, we embed it. Most people don't realise they have an avoidant attachment style until they get into their 20s and 30s and start romantic relationships and find them going very wrong very often. Because we're not looking for avoidant attachment styles in children and teenagers in the coaching arena. But they don't believe anyone can help them, they don't believe that anyone can love them, and they believe that I'm best off if I do this on my own. So they'll nod with you, they'll agree with you, you'll give them feedback and they just shut down, and it's almost like they mentally wipe you out of their universe. And they could love you deeply, but you give them the wrong piece of feedback, and particularly in a group setting. So if you gave them feedback in front of everyone else, you are literally wiped out of their universe and they'll never respect you ever again. And not because you did something wrong as a coach, but because the way you framed that feedback irritated something that was formed in them in the first 5 years of their life. So therefore you have to keep things very calm and very factual. And I'm going to have a look at all these in a bit more detail in a second about how else we can support them. Your disorganised child is conflicted, emotionally reactive, fearful and rejectful. They are very often banned from groups, whether that's sports groups, whether that's classrooms. They are the kids that are left in isolation at school, because if something kicks off in the classroom, they tend to be at the centre of it, or they're causing the drama in the classroom because they need to get out of it because I'm not safe. If they are in an environment in your gyms, whether it's a sports club, whatever you're doing, and their brain thinks that space is not safe, they will create a bit of catastrophe to allow them to escape it, to get away from it. When children with disorganised attachments get feedback, it's always unpredictable. You could give them feedback one day and they take it on the chin, and they're like, yeah, great, and they just action it. The next week you give them feedback and they literally explode on you. And it can be the same with their friends. Like, I'm sure a lot of you have got at least one child in your groups that has a really strong sense of moral justice, and they have to tell you when someone doesn't do something right at class this week or in your coaching this week. And it might be you didn't do something right this week. You didn't do it in the order you meant to do it in. If that child does this to that child, this child is likely to flip at them as well. So it doesn't have to just be feedback from an adult, it can be feedback from anyone else in the room. They really struggle to trust your intentions because no adult has ever shown me that they're trustworthy. So you could spend 5 years building up enough trust with these kids for them to get anywhere with you, which can be really hard because as a coach, you might be plugging at this every single week going, I'm giving you everything that's in my tank, but actually what they need is consistency over time. And that time is not a week and it's not a month, it's very often years. I need you to prove to me that you are going to be that person. So you have to be so consistent with them, and they very often require a lot more one-to-one than anyone else will. So how do we help? If I've got a secure attachment, then one, I'm your easy kid. Be clear, be honest, and deliver everything with kindness. I think, I'm a massive one for building resilience, but resilience doesn't come with us being horrible adults. It doesn't come, most of us will remember a time when we were at school when we were shamed by a teacher, criticised by a teacher, or given some feedback in a way that made us feel less. Feedback can be delivered in a very constructive, kind and compassionate manner, and all these attachment styles need that. I'm going to really encourage autonomy and decision making and use praise to reinforce efforts, not just outcomes. I'm a massive one that, yes, I know, particularly those of you working in sports, the outcomes are important, but actually it's the effort over time that's much more valuable. And I think I really loved, when we were talking earlier about the skills we learn from sports. It's not just about the winning, it's about the problem solving, it's about the teamwork, it's about those transferable skills. That's what we really want to celebrate with all these children. And we want to really think about their personal effort and their teamwork. I meet a lot of kids in my work as a therapist that they are fixated on having to win. One of my little boys told me last week that if he didn't win at sports day, that it's just the end of the world and he can't go to school anymore. And we talked about all the other things that he might lose out at home. And actually, mum's taken the board games away because then we don't lose and then we don't have an overreaction to it. And she's taken the card games away. They don't do anything at home now where he can lose. And I'm like, I find it really hard because I love my dad to bits. My dad was that dad who wouldn't even let you have the bumpers up at bowling. We had to learn to do it. And we played pool at the pool hall and we weren't allowed to win. You had to win off your own back. And I was 12 before I learned how to beat my dad at pool. And it's still the proudest achievement in my entire life. And I've had a lot of achievements. And it actually surpasses achieving my masters. It's up there. Because I did it off my own back. And my mum used to say to me, "You're so mean at us." And my partner is always like, with my stepkids, he's like, "Just let them win." And I'm like, "I'm not letting them win. They can learn to win." They can also learn to lose. Nicely, kindly. And, Alex laughs at me frequently because I'm like, I'm just not letting the kids win at stuff, please. Anxious attachments, you need loads of consistent encouragement. And it needs to be calm and kind. It can be very easy with kids with an anxious attachment style to become very melodramatic yourself. "Oh, you're so wonderful." No, stop it. They don't need that because everyone else can't meet that threshold. And I meet a lot of mums in parent coaching and I'm like, can we stop with the over the top feedback? Be consistent with it because they need to hear that this level of feedback is actually normal across the board from my teachers, from my grandparents, from family, friends. And when I'm up here being very dramatic with my feedback, kids learn that that's the only time I've been good. So it's thinking about when we're parents, when we're coaches, please don't go OTT because you actually want children to go, actually, this is what consistent feedback looks like. They are very sensitive to how things are said, not just what is said. So if you have to give them feedback, think through carefully what that looks like, and ideally do it one-to-one where you've got the time to give them plenty of reassurance. There was a really wonderful podcast I listened to last week that talked about we should never also give feedback on a Friday if they're not going to see you for the rest of the week, whether that's at work, whether it's in coaching. If you're going to give them feedback, do it at the start of the week where they can come back and speak to you about it again. Don't do it on the last day where they're not going to see you maybe for a week. Think about when your feedback is so that they won't just sit and ruminate on it. Pair correction with emotional support. So, if something's gone wrong, how can you help them correct it, but also give them the emotional support to put that through so they can see that you're still their friend. So you worked hard, that shot didn't go where you wanted, but we can use it to look at X, Y, and Z. Help them see how it's going to benefit from them. My avoidant attachments, you're going to have to work really slowly. There is no other way. Avoidant attachments don't believe that you're going to stay. Something to really bear in mind for those of you that have group coaching programs and multiple trainers is if you are aware of you have a child with an avoidant attachment and you have a staff member who is leaving, do not allow them to be the person who starts that journey if you know they're going to leave. So if you know a member of staff's only got 3 weeks left with you and you've got a new group starting, that member of staff should not be the one who starts that program because these kids see that as abandonment and they will automatically disengage because I've now got inconsistency of who I'm going to see every week. And it's something, we see a lot in schools, with schools that have a lot of supply staff. And every week the kid's got a new member of staff to contend with. If my brain doesn't feel safe, I can't learn. So if I know that you're leaving, I've built a relationship up with you for 2 weeks, and on week 3 you say, sorry guys, this is my last session, I'm not going to ever see you again, automatically their brain's now extra stressed. So really think about how you're managing your staff teams. Show up, stay calm, and model really reliable adult presence. So this is massively about regulating yourself. Most of us in this room were not taught how to manage our feelings. We just didn't live in a world where that's what our parents did. If my feelings were too big at home, my mum asked me to go to my bedroom and go and sort them out. So it's about thinking, how do you regulate your own feelings in this? If you give them feedback, give them space to process it, but don't let them leave before you've reconnected with them. So if you're going to give them some feedback about how to improve on something, they are going to need a little bit of time in that session to process it, think it through, and then come back to you to go, okay, do you have any questions? What are we going to do next time? And ideally make a plan for the next session off the back of that. Keep your feedback really neutral and really factual. Do not look at any feedback that relates to them as a person, their feelings, their reactions. They have to learn to take the feedback before they can correct the other stuff. And very often when we give feedback to kids, we get far too caught up in how they reacted. They're reacting like that because of their attachment style. They're reacting like that because an adult didn't teach them how to regulate. They're reacting like that because they've got a parent at home who, when they don't get their own way, explodes all over the household. If I haven't got anyone modelling that to me, how do I do it? Let them see you lose. Let them see you make mistakes and watch your other coaches help each other so that they can go, okay, this is what this looks like. Because a lot of these kids have no visual representation in their head of what this looks like in person. For my disorganised attachments, you want to create really safe, predictable environments that are really stable. These are not kids that do well with different kids every single week, so you ideally want something very stable in terms of who my group is, who my trainer is, what I'm doing, and ideally they need to know what the schedule is for next week a little bit ahead. So whether that's an email out, whether it's agreed in the last session, whether it's a text message out to somebody, think about how you can create predictability. Stick to routines, really clear boundaries and gentle transitions. You can't chop and change stuff and expect these kids to cope. They're just not going to cope. And not because they don't want to, but just because they physically don't have the capacity emotionally to. Stay really calm and don't react even when they're exploding. It's really hard not to become part of the battle. And when they're exploding, we sometimes think if we get louder or we talk over them that this is going to help. But what we call it is symmetrical escalation. One goes up, the other one goes up, and it just explodes. These kids are used to that happening. They are pushing your buttons to make that happen. Because if you explode, this is now safe, which is so backwards because you'll think to yourself, well, actually, why would they want it to explode? But chaos is predictable. Chaos is good. So if you explode with me, great, I'm safe. This is now normal. So actually, if you want to interject with it, you actually need to go, I need to keep myself really, really calm. I need to do the opposite of what their brain wants to get the outcome that I need. Don't take their shutdowns, their mood swings personally. If you have a child in your groups who, when something goes wrong, tends to give you an onslaught of abuse, a really quick and easy tip is change all their yous to I's. Yeah? You're so horrible to me, you don't care. I'm so horrible to me and I don't care. And actually take all of their attacks. You can do this with your partners and things at home as well. It works really well. But, your own kids, they're like, I hate you so much. It's not. It's, this is where I am. Offer feedback really slowly and supportively, and you're going to pick your battles. Start small and build up over time. And use loads of curiosity. What did you think was happening just then? Any questions? That was like the fastest I've probably ever done a presentation. Check that out.